regrets in sales. You have any?
Just a few, just a few. I don't know if we have time to talk about all of them, but yeah, regret's a powerful thing. I mean, I know people have heard this before, but you think about that deathbed example where you're on your deathbed, you can't do anything physically or mentally anymore, and then you're thinking about all those things in the past that you regret. There could be some big things, there could be some business things, there could be some sales things, but I try to think about that, and then that makes me want to limit regrets as much as possible. You're never gonna not have any regrets, but there are ways that you can try to limit regrets. So that's just sort of what I think about with life, but also in sales too, because there's a lot of mistakes I've made over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few, and I think people, certainly for me, I tried to say too safe at times, a couple of times, because during the .com boom, I turned down a VP of sales at this tiny integrator that I had worked with. I had sold them some stuff and got them a lot of business when they started off as 2 people. But then they ballooned to about 30, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come in and run sales for us?" And I was like, "I don't want to sell services." And they're like, "No, we're going to go public." I go, "You're a services company. They don't go public. You'd have to get up to thousands of people." Yeah, I couldn't have been more wrong. They ended up going public. At one time, they were worth more than Sears. They had this huge market cap. The founder cashed out. He took it private probably 5, 6 years later after the .com bust. And I go, "Why don't you talk to my friend? He'd be interested in that role." Guess how much he made on just the equity?
Oh, I don't know if I want to know.
$30 million,
Ooh, wow.
and retired in
Goodness
his
gracious.
early 40s. And I was, and I put a lot of friends into the company. But, in hindsight, would I have made the same well, if I knew it was going to happen, of course I would have taken it. But if somebody offered that to me today, you're like, yeah, I'd have probably the same opinion. It was like, could I have done it? Probably. Was it me? No. But then at the same time, there was BEA that later got bought by Oracle. Again, I turned down this role and took this safe role with this other smaller company, but it was well established. I knew the product, I knew the customers. It was an easy thing to do instead of the smart thing to do. And I referred somebody into that job, and he walked away with 5 or 6 million in equity and took me out to dinner. And he goes, "I owe you a lot more than dinner." I go, "You sure do."
Where's my referral fee or my commission check?
Yeah. And then in the inverse, the same people who started BEA started this company called Kenamea, and they recruited me to it, raised a ton of money, and then 9/11 happened. So we had about 5, 8 reps, 0 revenue, and they were paying us on MBOs, management by objectives. And it was okay pay, but it wasn't like there's no real upside on it. And after 9/11, it was, you talk about ghost town. I mean, you couldn't get a meeting for the first 3, 6 months. People just didn't want to talk about anything. Everyone was scared and quiet. And I looked around and I go, "I got to get out of here because no one's buying." Guess what's going to happen to the sales team?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be caught without a chair, in this type of situation. So I got yet another job. And I think in sales, you got to ask yourself, how much risk can you take? Are you the risk taking type? But also think about, where are you in life? If you're in your 20s, risks are pretty cheap. If you're in your
Mm-hmm.
30s and you don't have kids and you don't have big bills and stuff, it's still pretty inexpensive to take risks. So take them, because that's the time when they're the least impactful, like what you're doing now. I mean, if you had 3 kids and a big mortgage and, you know, had to save for college, would you do this?
No, most likely not. So yeah, I don't have as many examples as you right there. I guess I need to get myself out there more with all these job opportunities at startups. But I have gone to a startup and that didn't work out. And that's actually how it led me to what I'm doing now. But yeah, I think an epiphany for me was like I was working for the same company for almost a decade. I was climbing the ladder. Like I wanted to be VP, president, like just that typical path. But then I realized I was like working myself to death. Like I was living to work versus working to live type thing. And I was just
Yeah.
like velvet coffin, golden handcuffs, I think they call it, where you're just like slowly dying inside, climbing the corporate ladder. And I was like, do I really want to do this for the next 20 years? Because I probably could have. And then that kind of just made me have a different kind of change in mindset where I was willing to take more risks and change industries and all that. And then eventually I did take a chance at a startup where I was hoping to do something similar to your your buddies that you talked about. And I thought I was going to make all this money and I was going to get this cash out in like 4 or 5 years. That didn't work out because most of the company got laid off and I was part of that. So, but it kind of led me to what I'm doing now, where I was like, you know what? I've been doing this salespreneur thing for a long time. I feel comfortable with it. I know what I can accomplish. I have a good track record. And it just the timing made sense to do my own thing. But I wouldn't do that if I had a lot more commitments, like family and kids. It could have been a little tougher conversation. But I don't want to look back 5 or 10 years from now and be like, man, why didn't I start that business when I could have? At least I'm going to try. If it doesn't work out, like I'll be fine. I can probably go get a job somewhere. But you know, you don't want to look back and be like, man, I wish I would have started that business or whatever it is. I think so. That's just what I think about a lot, and it helps keep me motivated to take risks. It's not always going to work out, though. That's one thing.
It's not. And most of the time
Yeah.
it won't, because a lot of people, oh, I'm going to go into this startup. And it's like, okay, good. But most of them don't work out. Just you can look at the venture capitalists. They don't anticipate them all working out. They're looking for the 100 bagger, the one that's going to get them 100 times return. And they know it's only going to be 1 out of 30 companies that they invest in. But on the regret side, if you don't take the risks, I can pretty much tell you what's going to happen to your career. You're just going to be 30 years older in the same type of role at some other company. And I've seen a lot of friends do it. And I had this kind of idea this week because I was talking to a friend and I go, if I recorded that call and sent it to him back in time, he wouldn't believe that that's where he would be. And then I said, well, how about this service? How about if you, okay, send me your LinkedIn profile and let me interview you for a half hour and I'll tell you where you're going to be in 30 years if you don't change.
Yeah, it's a scary thought. You should actually start that on your podcast or
Your
something where you do that, where you
business.
do, yeah, that could be like a whole new revenue stream for you. I feel like that would be entertaining probably to get the truth, but it's a
Oh,
scary thought. Yeah, you
it
don't
is
want to
very
be,
scary.
yeah, like doing the same thing. I mean, hey, if you're happy and you got a good life, that's one thing. But if you're trying to achieve stuff and you stay in the status quo, like, and then
Or
30 years from now you're doing this, yeah, it's just,
yeah,
ooh.
because inertia or osmosis isn't going to get you there. I remember being in the Ottawa airport and my sales engineer, we used to bust on each other all the time. And there was this old guy, old sales guy with the bag and the worn out suit at the bar, clearly in his late 50s, miserable, drinking, trying to get through the day. And he goes, that's going to be you in 20 years. And that stuck with me because if you don't do something, that's where you're going to be in time. If you don't take responsibility for your career, because those the idea that you're going to luck into a company or get onto a rocket ship, it can happen. You hear about the receptionist at Facebook being worth $10 million because of the equity, or they bought a painting with stock and now the guy's worth 100 million. Assume that's not you. Assume that you're just one of the people. And let's say you're an A player. You got to get into a situation where that is valued and rewarded. Or you
Yeah,
want to be an A player.
yeah, it's not just being an A player. You got to combine your forces with a company that's like a rocket ship, which is not easier said than done. But in order to do that, you have to like take that risk. And I think a lot of times people just are waiting for the quote unquote perfect time to do stuff, or like, oh, now's not the right time. I'm gonna do it later. And you keep like pushing it back. The next thing you know, you're that guy at the airport bar who hates his job, drinking every day, because you
Yeah.
see that a lot in sales, unfortunately. But I think waiting for the perfect time is something I hear a lot, or I've even said to myself. And it's like sometimes, of course, you want to be strategic on certain big decisions, but like sometimes you just have to like do it, and like it's not going to be perfect, but you have to like kind of take that risk and just make it happen.
Yeah. Because it always is your decision. And you always have to own that decision. You can take feedback and input from other people. And that's why I hate giving, job switch advice to people. Because I remember people early in the podcast, I'd schedule calls and they go, oh, I want to get into technology. I go, you should get into technology. They were in some latent legacy business where the upside was like 150. And I'm like, he wanted to make 300. And it's like, is it possible in your current industry? He goes, no one's making that kind of money. I go, that's quite common in technology. But then he takes his first technology job and it didn't work out. And he blamed me. He goes, you were wrong about technology. I go, I wasn't wrong about technology. That job may not have been right for you. That company may not be right for you. You have to own it. You know, I didn't tell you to take that job. You took that job. I had no idea. I didn't meet the manager. I don't know nothing about the product. Don't just assume that, oh, you try something once and it didn't work. And I think a lot of people don't want to own those decisions because it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, and I mean you gotta make that effort, and it's not always going to work out. So I go back to that startup, like I did that. It didn't work out for me in that specific situation, but I also learned a ton about how startups work. I learned good things, I learned bad things, and that knowledge and experience is going to help me no matter what I do. I want to keep doing my entrepreneur thing, but if I end up starting something else, the fact that I have that startup experience, I mean, it builds you up whether it works out or not, and you have to just kind of own that and take, if you fail or whatever, or you get laid off, whatever happens, like take the good things from it and like learn from whatever mistake you made, right? Because I was probably chasing the allure of this startup and the money upside, not
Right.
things you necessarily want to have at the top all the time. So I was maybe chasing some of the wrong things too much, but I learned from it now. So I definitely am not going to do that again. So
Well, you remember that one-on-one we had, and you asked me to turn the recorder off, and you were telling me about the job and asking me what I thought. And I was trying to be kind of cagey about it because you were really optimistic. And I know
yeah, I think
nothing about this space.
you said something, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that I'll remember that now. So you know what? I
Yeah.
should blame you for that. You know what, Brian? I'm gonna blame you for that because you told me to do it basically. So
But if you look at this, it's got to be up to you. And the people who say, "Oh, I don't have any regrets. I do everything the same," they're lying. Everybody's, you always get those calls, or you see some friend go into a company and you say, "Oh, could I have done that?" And there was another guy in the Start the Conversation course. He was an SDR at a company. He decided to go do an appointment setting company from what he learned in the course. And he's killing it now. You know, because what he can do is they all think he's getting the meetings for them. He taught a bunch of virtual assistants how to do different parts of it. And he's getting meetings going so much quicker because he doesn't have to do all the grunt work himself. You know, and then he's sharing it on LinkedIn. I go, I'd rather you not share that you get the meeting, but not how you get the meeting.
yeah, for sure.
So he
Yeah. So
went
man,
from
yeah,
being an SDR making what 80K to probably making 300 right now.
that's amazing. And I mean, even if I do take those risks and I fail, I'd rather know that I took that risk versus not acting at all. So, I mean, in that case, obviously he took your course. Maybe that was getting out of his comfort zone, probably, because a lot of times people don't want to take coaching or mentoring and pay for it. So he did that and then ran with it and kind of using your philosophy to help him. So hopefully he doesn't market your whole course while he's doing that, but still it's like, that's an example of taking a risk, and he doesn't regret that for sure, because it kind of took his life in a new trajectory, it sounds like.
Yeah, because about 10 years ago I started my own thing, and certainly the first couple years were really hard. Technology wasn't where it is today. No one knew what a podcast was. LinkedIn was just a job site that people logged into once every 3 months. So it was just, old school cold calling and getting meetings and, doing services on site. And, although I wasn't much happier, it was still better than working for other people for me. And that I enjoyed. And then all of a sudden, you could have online courses. LinkedIn took off. Podcasts became hot around 2016. And then all of a sudden, LinkedIn has video now. So the videos that I was doing on YouTube, now on LinkedIn, it went from getting 500 on YouTube to 5,000, 50,000 on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, boom, you got a real business.
Yeah. And if you're going to work hard, I always think about this too. It's like, if I'm going to work my butt off and work hard, if I work for a company, the reality is they're going to replace you. The second you're gone, they're going to replace you the next day. So if you're going to do that, you might as well be doing it for yourself. Hey, maybe you don't make as much, or maybe you have to grind more, but at least you're making your own schedule. You're probably enjoying it way more. At least I am so far. And it's like, yeah, it's a grind, but it's like, I'm doing it for myself and I'm passionate about it, versus like working for someone else and then they're going to replace you the next day, regardless of how great supposedly you are.
Yeah, because I get hit up all the time. People saying, well, hey, can I have a call with you? I'm looking to become a sales coach or a sales trainer. And they're making huge money now. And they're like, well, I think I can make more doing this. I go, eventually, but not for a while. What do you mean? And they always give me like, the people at the very top. And it's like, yeah, but look where they started. You're seeing them after 10 years. Do you have both the time, the patience, the energy, and the support to go through that gauntlet to get there? And do you
Yeah.
have anything unique, or are you just a bright, shiny version of something else?
Yeah. It's not as glamorous as it may seem, right? Especially those first
No,
two or
it's not
two or three
glamorous.
years. And that's how it always is. Like, the people that are really successful, you never see behind the scenes of like what work they put in there, all the risks they took. I'm sure they have a lot of regrets and things they would have done differently, but yeah, it's a build up over time. I mean, I think you've mentioned in the past, like, your third year in a job is usually when things take off from a
Pops,
sales
yeah.
standpoint. Yeah, but like, sometimes people are they want this instant gratification that they will jump ship or go to a different company before they even get to that time, because they're not willing to kind of put in the long-term work. And that's something that you can probably regret too, is if you leave somewhere too soon, or you don't really give it that time, because it's like, you're chopping a tree down that takes 100 chops to chop it down, but then on 99 you give up and you throw down the axe. It's like, you got to like keep pushing forward, and you're going to regret if you leave stuff too soon, probably, as well.
Yeah. And the other thing is like relocating. This isn't as important today as it has been in the past, but like when I meet talented people in weird geographies where it's not the prime geography for that industry. And this is critical because, like, if you graduate from Stanford or MIT, guess which one you're going to have a higher likelihood of. Both schools say they're equal. But
Mhm.
Boston startups are very different than Silicon Valley startups. And I've met great sales managers. I go, if you move to Silicon Valley, you're an A player here, you're going to be a A+ player there. And I've seen B players move to Silicon Valley and be treated like A players just because of supply and demand.
Mm.
Same if you're in finance, you got to be in New York City. Otherwise you're just not in the ecosystem. And that's something that It's not as big of a deal today, but if you really want to take it to the best level, especially when you're young, before you buy a house, before you get married and have kids and the dog and the roots are there and it's really hard to pull them out, go to the place that's going to give you the most opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it is way different now. It's just the pandemic and working remote and all that. But when I first started my career in 2010, it was back when, at least the company I was working at, if you want to get promoted fast, you had to be willing to move and relocate. So I literally moved 4 times in 5 years right out of school, but I got promoted every single time. And I wasn't making like commission per se. It was more like a base bonus type thing, but I moved up like rapidly fast. And part of that was because I was willing to move and take those chances. And if I wouldn't have done that, there's no way I would have moved up as fast as I did at the time. And it was, I got to go to cool places too. I was like living Fort Lauderdale, like right out of school. I mean, it was like, hey, why not? Why not? It sounded great at the time. It'd be much harder to do that now, but like it made sense at the time, like in your 20s. So
Yeah. And people will kind of rationalize, oh, we can go on Zoom and we can talk on the phone, but you miss those informal meetings, the parties on the weekends, the bumping into each other at the gym or having coffee in the morning. It's those relationships and that ecosystem that you're either part of or you have to dial into. And that proximity, I think, is people don't really think about. Because when I'm at a startup, they usually let go the people that are geographically the furthest away.
yeah, there's something to be said about that camaraderie, that engagement, that like happy hours you do with the team, the connections you meet in a big city like
Yeah.
New York or Silicon Valley, like just the people you're going to meet that who knows, they might help you get a job later down the road. So I mean, there's so much value in it, and I'm sure people, especially when you can't move and you have a family and stuff, you're like, man, I wish I would have taken that job or moved back then, because it would have been worth it to at least take that. And if it didn't work out, it's like I'd rather take that risk and learn from it than regret it 20 years later. So
Yeah. Because, in Silicon Valley, you go out running, you're going to bump into some pretty powerful people. They're not going to look like powerful people, but just that network, it's like going to a great school. Those people scatter to the four winds, but they're going to have success somewhere, and them. You got drunk with them. You saved their butt, or right? Those
yeah.
relationships, that is something that you can't really replace.
Yep. Another thing you made me think of is like I'm all about kind of like investing in myself, because I think that prevents having regrets. So like coaching, mentoring. I mean, ever since I did your course years ago, I took some other courses, but I've kind of just gone down this like coaching path. But I feel like it's saved me years of like mistakes. Like I've learned so much. I've met so many people from doing this coaching thing, and I feel like a lot of times people don't invest in themselves as much from a sales standpoint, and they regret that at some point too, because it can be a little uncomfortable, but like once you start doing like coaching and things like that, it really can kind of take things to another level. So I try to invest in myself to avoid regrets, and that's one way I do it. So
Yeah, because if you look at it's a performance profession, if you don't have feedback, you're either on a spiral up or a spiral down. And the feedback gets you on the spiral up. It makes sure that if you're going down, you can stop and put the inertia back to going back up. But what typically happens is people, let's say they have an A-level job. It's hard to find another A-level job quickly. They're out there, they'll surface maybe once, twice a year. But if you're desperate, they're probably not going to be there. So what do? You take a B-level job. And then you're unhappy because it's a B company and a B market with a B product, and you're an A player, but you can only do so much. If that doesn't work, you go to another B company, or it turns out to be a C company, go down and down. A headhunter told me this. And headhunters, if you find a great one, they're great coaches because they see so many people screwing up their careers. They know what a good job is. They know what a great sales manager is. And if you build a relationship with them where you feed them prospects instead of just calling them when you're desperate, they'll tell you the truth. And they've told me, it's like, it's an okay job. And I appreciated that. Or they've said, you got to get into this group of people. And that's where I came up with the mafia strategy, because there was this group in this town where there was this kingpin manager, and he had a bunch of reps, and he would go from one A company to another, cook the comp plan for everybody, get great comp plans for everyone would just kill it. And then he'd go to the next company and do the same thing all over again. And it's like, that was so much easier than trying to find a good product, build a relationship with the manager, because the manager doesn't know you. They're going to give you an okay territory. But if they know you and they can count on you, they'll give you the great territory, because they want someone who can close the deal.
It's a great point. The mafia thing made me think of LinkedIn for me, because another thing I did in the last couple of years was like start posting on LinkedIn and kind of building up a personal brand. And that was like something I wanted to do for a while. I never did it. I kept making excuses, and I finally did it and started doing it. But like the amount of people I've met from LinkedIn, it's like its own little mafia in itself that are in sales or healthcare or whatever. I just have like this massive network of people, and I've gotten so many leads and just conversations from doing that. But it's like, years ago, I kept saying I'm going to start my personal brand. I'm going to start posting, but I never did it. And I finally pulled the trigger. And now it's like I have like this whole world of people. And I'm, who knows where I'd be now if I wouldn't have started doing that, quite frankly, because it's introduced me to a lot of different places and people.
Yeah. And certainly, but my evolution with it, because when I first started doing it, probably 80% of the comments were negative and had nothing to do with the content of the video. It was just like personal attacks, what they felt about the title. They didn't even watch the video. Now, most people would read that and go, why am I doing this? It's work. I'm not getting anything from it. I'm going to give up. But I kind of got to the point where it was like, I don't care what they do. I just delete and block them because they're not helping me. And all of a sudden, if you power through it, because it took a year before one of my videos went viral on LinkedIn. And nobody remembers like the 2018 videos, and then 2019, I did a comedy one. And it was just out of my frustration with the stupidity of sales that I was just walking around. I had these ideas. I go, why don't I recorded it. I went home and I edited it. Let's see how it goes. Because before I was getting a good video was 5,000 views. This one got 50,000 in 2 days. And I was like, that was an epiphany. Now, if I quit the year before because people were making fun of what I was wearing, what I look like, the background, the shakiness of the camera, no subtitles, most people give up.
Then you have that breakout. So it just takes that one video, and then that probably took your breath in a whole other direction. Because I mean, everybody knows you from the videos now, but they don't know the story behind those the first 18 months or however long it took. So it's a great point. And especially with social media, you got to be like consistent, like each day or a few times a week, and you're not going to get some overnight success. I'm sure there's some exceptions, but rarely does that ever happen.
It doesn't. And because it's risk reward, and a lot of people won't do it because there's no reward immediately. And I remember there was like a couple of SDRs up in Boston were saying, that's not even your neighborhood. And I was like, I could go on YouTube. I've got 10 years of these videos of me walking around on YouTube. No one's seen most of them. They got 50 views, but it was the same, mostly sales tips. And I'm like, what do you think I do? Fly to a new neighborhood every morning to do my videos? And they go, no, it's a green screen. And I'm like, okay, whatever you want to believe, delete and block.
Hey, if you have haters, that means you're doing something right, is what I was told from someone. So I think that's a good sign when you have haters, honestly.
And what switches eventually is, if I put out a mediocre video today, it still does okay. Where it would have been a total flop back in 2018 when I started doing them. It's because either I've worn out the haters, or they've kind of given up, or you've given so much value and so much help to people that people will go along with something that's okay. So I think too many people just want to stay safe and don't, and not that the answer to everything is videos on LinkedIn, but the answer to everything is you pushing yourself a little bit more than you're comfortable with.
No doubt. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's 100% what it is. Like all the breakthroughs in my life have been when I've done something uncomfortable, taken a risk, and like being open to change. So that's why that kind of motto or mantra, I guess you could say, is just investing in yourself to avoid regrets in the future. So that's, I literally say that daily, and it just helps me kind of stay motivated with doing stuff like this. So